So, I have a theory to share today that Palkia right now is arguably one of the best Pokemon in the entire format. Now, I've gone completely unbeaten using this team I got from Cybertron's channel, which features a Palkia Trick Room with Babiri, Calyrex. And the only teams I've lost with on this channel are not this team. I've won 20 games and counting with this team, right from Ultra Ball to Master Ball. And I think the reason Palkia is so phenomenal right now is that it counters both of the dominant weather archetypes so well in terms of Groudon, Charizard, and Kyogre. And paired with Indeedee, unless you're running Imprison or kind of Trick Room on a hyper-offensive Pokemon like Whimsicott, it's very, very difficult to stop Palkia from getting Trick Room up. And once it's there, with its phenomenal typing, it can output pressure onto just about everything. And the key difference between it and Dialga, because Dialga is obviously a very similar Pokemon, is that Palkia is not scared of Precipice Blades, Heat Wave, all the powerful spread type attacks. Even Astral Barrage it takes better with its relatively superior special defense. And because it can take all of those spread type attacks better, it's a lot better for getting Trick Room up consistently. Now, one challenge I want to ask people is, how do you think this team can be improved? Because I personally don't really like Incineroar, and I think Porygon is kind of unnecessary on this team because Trick Room is already so easy to get up with Palkia. And there's already so many utility Pokemon on this team with, Amoonguss, Indeedee. And so I think adding a unique hyper-offensive core or maybe some other kind of subversive Trick Room Pokemon could be very interesting. Now, the game I'm featuring today was probably one of the slowest games I've played in weeks, and that's why it's sped up. And you can just see that my opponent cannot stop me from getting Trick Room up. They did a phenomenal job of switching out, pivoting in order to just stall out my offensive momentum and prevent me from getting knockouts. And while they did that phenomenally well, every time they stalled Trick Room out, I just got it up again because they had no way to break through the redirection of Indeedee and Amoonguss and stop Palkia from getting Trick Room up. And eventually the damage pressure from Calyrex Ice Rider was just too much for them. And Calyrex Ice Rider, by the way, another Pokemon that I think has been looked over because of how poor its matchup into Zacian is, but Babiri is trending up now, and I can absolutely see why. It's, it can take a Behemoth Blade quite reliably and catches people off guard. You can obviously revenge kill Zacian with Max Quake. And as you can see in this game, they're just switching out, they're doing everything they can, but once Trick Room is up, if you don't have a reliable answer to Amoonguss, and I imagine the meta will eventually shift and make using teams like this a bit more difficult. However, at least right now, I would say 9 out of 10 teams I play do not have a reliable answer to Trick Room. They don't have Imprison, they don't have their own Dusclops. Sometimes teams have their own Amoonguss, which can be problematic, and I actually think an Amoonguss counter would probably go well on this team. But with the amount of redirection users that are here, it's really not that big an issue. I actually did do a live commentary on this game, but as you would know, my microphone wasn't recording. But yeah. And the main issue I had with this game is really that Kyogre was healthy throughout, and even though I was pressuring Spore, this, and Glacial Lance, Spatial Ren, Hydro Pump, all these moves, I couldn't really get any damage to Kyogre, and they did such a phenomenal job of switching in Grimmsnarl, switching in Incineroar, making me Spore into slots that were already asleep, protecting, pivoting out. Absolute masterclass in them in terms of defensive pivoting and switching, but at the end of the day, if you don't have an answer to Trick Room and you don't have a powerful spread type attack, the fundamental thing that makes Palkia so difficult to counter as a Trick Room option is that it's not vulnerable to any of the dominant spread type attacks. And so if you can't break through the redirection, obviously you can't break through Indeedee with Fake Out. Amoonguss is incredibly bulky. If you don't have a way to kind of shockingly just blow these redirection users out the water, then you really can't touch Palkia. And I think I would imagine if you're playing against this team, Imprison is probably your only reliable option. And as you can see here, they do get a Spirit Break off. But one of the other amazing things on this team is that both Amoonguss and Indeedee have ally healing moves and Heal Pulse and Pollen Puff respectively. And, with 4v4, this is a very slow, methodical game. Probably one of the most mentally intense games I've played in a very long time. And I was kind of nervous if this was the game that was going to end my unbeaten streak. I actually think for the majority of this game, they had the advantage because they stalled out my Dynamax really well. They stalled out my Trick Room multiple times. They had Kyogre at full health. Zacian was healthy. Grimmsnarl and Incineroar were just generally being irritating. And for me, it was just a question of where was the damage going to come from. But in the end, they just didn't have an answer to Amoonguss. And so every time, they stalled Trick Room out. I got Trick Room back up. I put everything back to sleep. And eventually, with a bit of luck and a bit of timing, I was able to get Calyrex in a good position where it could finally start picking up knockouts. And another tech on this Calyrex is Swords Dance. Now, I think Swords Dance is amazing because with these redirection users, you have so many kind of free turns. And the reason why I don't generally like stat boosting moves and doubles because things are generally too dynamic and chaotic to kind of reliably predict when you're going to get that standalone turn to set up. But when you're playing Trick Room, your opponent is so frequently going to protect and switch out. And, the turns where, especially when they're faced up with Amoonguss, the turns where people are going to switch out and protect are so obvious. And you have that protection from the redirection users. So knowing when to Swords Dance on this team is very easy and it helps you play around the Incineroar. And Calyrex only really needs to be at neutral, pick up one knockout, and start snowballing. And this was the period in the game where I felt like I was going to lose because they stalled out Trick Room. They got Max Lightning out, so I couldn't put them to sleep. But I got Trick Room back up here, and the key thing is I had Indeedee. And with Indeedee, I was able to reset the terrain to block Fake Out, knock out the Incineroar, and then bizarrely, in my mind, they actually Max Geyser. I believe this turn they actually Max Geyser into the Amoonguss slot, which is probably their crucial mistake. I don't think Max Geyser would KO Calyrex, but by knocking out Indeedee, they just give me a free switching back into Amoonguss, and then everything left in the back is vulnerable to sleep. And so you can just see how this team, none of the dominant team archetypes right now, whether it's Kyogre, whether it's Charizard, Groudon, whether it's kind of Zacian, Lecky, Calyrex, blah, 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 Rillaboom, and Incineroar, the most original things in the world. None of the dominant team archetypes right now really had any answers into this team format. And I think, as I said, the main weakness of this team is really that it is very reliant on utility Pokemon. So as you can see, all of my damage here is coming from 2 Pokemon. And that does make you very vulnerable to defensive pivoting and protecting because it's very easy for your opponent to predict what slot the damage is coming from and what moves you're likely to use. And that's where I think this team can be expanded on if people like me or anyone watching this video is interested in using this team and participating in regionals. I do think this team is just missing another mode because I really don't think Incineroar and Porygon add enough value. But as you can see, we put the Kyogre to sleep here, and after this it's just a question of, okay, Zacian's obviously going to sleep next turn if it doesn't protect. We stalled out Kyogre's Dynamax, and because I think we're at +1 now, we can finally start doing damage to Kyogre. And so I do believe they cancel this turn because I've got no reason to attack Zacian here because we can just put it to sleep, and Zacian can't run Lumberry or anything. So we just go high horsepower into the Kyogre and they forfeit. And that was an incredibly slow, demanding game, but to go 20 plus games unbeaten with one team, I think is completely unprecedented. I've been playing VGC for over a year now. And so I really recommend anyone use this team. Again, credit to Cybertron and the original creator of this team for giving me this idea. But I really would love to take recommendations on how to improve it. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope everyone has a great day. Cheers.